Hey guys, Terry Red here, and I'm continuing my Future Pinball BAM All-in-One Essentials video series. This is going to be part 3, which is talking about Future Pinball and BAM OpenVR. So using Future Pinball in virtual reality. So this is basically, well, actually, before you even get to this video, you need to have Future Pinball and BAM fully set up, installed, and updated. And that is covered in the part 1 video, which is you can see right here. So if you follow this video, it'll get you up and going. It doesn't actually take long to get everything installed. It's one zip file. You install the file, the contents of that file. You just follow this to make sure you're updated with the right prerequisites, and then the settings files, and then after that you're kind of ready to go, and then you can come to this video to then carry on to try to use Future Pinball with a VR. It doesn't actually take long. Despite this video length, this is me talking and describing many different features and other stuff. So don't let that dissuade you, and start that before coming into this video. Then you'll be good to go. Okay, guys, so I'm basically, what I'm going to do in this video is I'm just going to follow through my guide and explain things as best I can. And then eventually I'll just try showing you something in VR and showing it as best I can with how well that you can record stuff that way. So bottom line is for Future Pinball has what's called BAM OpenVR. So what that does is it's a version of BAM that allows you to run Future Pinball using OpenVR. So basically, the bottom line is if you have a VR headset that can work with Steam VR, then ideally that headset should work with Future Pinball in VR. I've only had Oculus headsets, so the Rift CV1, a Rift S, a MetaQuest 2, and now I'm using a MetaQuest 3. I can't comment on other headsets, but ideally they should work. For most people I've talked to that have different headsets have been able to get it to work, so that it should be fine. But the other extremely important thing that you need to know before you even start is you need a fast PC, and I mean a fast PC. So you can't base it, for example, let's say you have a good PC and you're able to run visual pinball tables in VR smoothly. Well, Future Pinball, understand, runs things with real-time dynamic lighting, and some of my tables have very detailed models and other things going on, so you can't compare them both because, Visual Pinball is using pre-baked textures for most of everything it does. That's way less demanding, whereas Future Pinball's lighting is real-time dynamic depending on the table and how it's been used, which can look amazing in VR, but it's also more demanding. So you need to manage your expectations, all right? So, my PC that I use currently is this one right here. It's an i5 13600K with an RTX 3080. All right, this is just enough to run all tables smooth and proper with a MetaQuest 3. So I just want to manage your expectations. This is what I had before, and it was fine for a MetaQuest 2, but with a MetaQuest 3 at the minimum frequency refresh rate, it was not quite enough. Some tables were struggling, so I just want you to manage that. Now, the reason why that is, with Future Pinball, you need a fast CPU. All right, your single core speed on your CPU is extremely important because Future Pinball is limited by that. And if that is not fast enough, it's going to hold back your GPU, which is what happened here with the different PC with this mid-range PC. That's what was happening. It was holding back my RTX 3080, and it wasn't performing as fast as it could with Future Pinball. So I just want to make sure people understand the differences of why. Your PC may be good enough for some apps, but when running it with Future Pinball, it may or may not be. So particularly in VR, because VR is at least twice as demanding as normal 2D mode, right? So just so you manage those expectations going in, then as long as you have that understanding, then you'll know what you're in for. Because you can run this, it may seem to run fine, like your head movement will be smooth and everything, but if you're not able to stay above the minimum frames per second that's required for, if it's like, say, you're running in 72 hertz, well, then you need to be above 72 frames per second at all times, not 60, 70, above 72. And if you're not, well, then the ball movement will be stuttery, right? The table movement may be stuttery. Your head movement will be smooth, but then the game in VR is not keeping up. And what happens is then it'll switch to synchronous space warp for Oculus headsets, which means it's running at half the FPS, and that messes up Future Pinball. So it's extremely important that you understand that, because we cannot use screen synchronous space warp with Future Pinball. All right, it just does not work right. All right, so I just wanted to manage your expectations before we jump in here. Okay, so what is required to run this? Well, we kind of already covered that. You basically need the Future Pinball BAM All-in-One Essentials package, which will get you everything covered in here. Your Visual C Plus updates, your DirectX, Future Pinball, and the latest BAM OpenVR. You need to make sure Defender antivirus isn't messing anything up, and that's all covered in this video here. All right, the other things you'll need, well, obviously whatever you need for VR. So if you're using a link cable, you can do that. If you're using a wireless option, which is the preferred option, then you need your wireless router set up, and you need to make sure that you can use Virtual Desktop or Steam Link or AirLink, whichever one. You know, you need to be familiar with that stuff at least and know that it's working. And my test PCs I mentioned before were these two here. And these were the results I got. So using my mid-range PC, just so you understand, so that's, 9600K with a 3080, which, that was a little bit of a bottleneck for that GPU. You could see that on all the typical PinEvent tables, which are the most demanding tables for Future Pinball, you could see it's not a great experience. Like, you know what I mean? Like, very few of them actually ran smooth and perfect at the minimum, which is 72 hertz, okay? Whereas with my higher end PC, which is what I mentioned before, this one here, then everything ran perfect and smooth at 72 hertz and 80 hertz. But then beyond that, some started to struggle, and that's with or without pup-Packs enabled as well for pup streaming, which is extremely cool. So just so you understand, what is going to be required here. It is pretty high end here. And as far as the Future Pinball settings, well, that's easy. I mean, it's the same as what we did in this video, and I show you exactly everything here. The bottom line that you really need to understand is you're going to want to have reflections disabled. They're extremely demanding, and even with a fast PC, even on my PC, I need to keep them disabled for the more demanding tables, okay? So just keep that in mind. Now, the next thing is vertical sync, and we'll talk more about that. That needs to be disabled if your PC monitor that you're running Future Pinball on, the refresh rate can't match what you're running in VR. So if your PC monitor can only do 60 hertz, but you have to run VR at a minimum of 72 hertz or higher, well, then it can't be synced up. And therefore, you have to have vertical sync disabled in Future Pinball to allow it to run correctly in VR. Now, normally you want VSync on with Future Pinball. It simply runs much better with vertical sync. But in this case, if you can't get your monitor and VR headset to match with the same refresh rate, you have no choice. You have to have this off. So those are the two big things you have to be aware of. You also have to make sure that arcade mode and second back box monitor are disabled. The rest of the settings are the settings that you have to use, just like in this picture. And the easy way to do all this is by just running my batch file here, start Future Pinball, and that will set everything up in VR for you. The only thing it will not do is, as I covered in previous videos, is it won't change your resolution or your display. So you set that to whatever you want, and it won't change your rotation. If you want to change that for whatever reason, you can. Or if you have that preset already, it doesn't affect VR at all. None of this will affect VR. So you can run this at a low resolution if you want. But the bottom line is we need to run this in full screen, so that way it runs the best and most correctly with Future Pinball. All right. And as you can see, it disables this for you automatically, and then it sets everything else up that we have to have. Anti-aliasing won't help. Trilinear filtering does help. It does help a little bit in VR. But beyond that, yeah, just make sure it matches what you see in the picture. That batch file will do that for you automatically, okay? All right. And that's basically what just is talking about right here, okay? This is saying pretty much what I just told you, all right? So read through here, and then the VSync is what I mentioned before, that it all has to match up if you're going to have VSync on. Otherwise, you have to have it off. There is an option to make VSync work, and I'm going to talk about that in the next section. Okay, so if you want to be able to use Future Pinball VSync, which is the best way, Future Pinball runs the best when VSync is on. The only way you can do that is to have your Windows resolution refresh rate and your VR refresh rate match. And so to do that, we're going to have to, one, have a monitor that will allow you to do that. So if you have a 60 hertz monitor, it may not allow you to run at a higher refresh rate. But if you have, say, like a 120 hertz monitor or a 144 hertz monitor, then it may allow you to do that, right? So what you could do is you can create a custom resolution, and that's what this section is talking about here. So I'm going to show you basically how that's done is by going to your NVIDIA control panel. And now I've actually already got mine set up, but I'll go through the same process. So basically you would go to custom, you would choose your high refresh rate monitor and you would choose customize. And then you would click create custom resolution. And then I would recommend HD, which would allow for a higher refresh rate. And it's going to be less demanding on Future Pinball, because you don't want to run at a higher resolution because VR is going to be doing a separate render anyway. So there's no point in running it at 4K. It's not going to be a benefit, and it's going to be more demanding, and you have a better chance at running a higher refresh rate at 1920 by 1080. And then you would just enter, like, say 80, you would hit test, and then if it, here, actually, I'll just go through that. I'll just go through the process here. Hold on, I'll just delete one, and then you'll see it for yourself. All right, so you click create custom resolution. I'm going to create one for 90 hertz. Then you hit test. Now, in my case, it came up and said, yes, this will work, no problem. If it doesn't work for you, it just stays blank on your screen. That means that your monitor can't handle it. So just wait patiently for it to come back, and then you can't use it is the bottom line. Now, in my case, I could. That's why I hit yes. And then you want to make sure this is enabled to allow these to be used and make sure they're checked off. Now, you don't have to add all these. I added these. These are the 3 that you can use in VR. You can actually use the 120 hertz too, but that's way beyond what I'm going to be able to handle here. And then now you'll see you have a custom resolution. You can click on here, and then now it allows you to choose any of those. So what's going to happen is when you choose that, it's going to then have Windows run at that resolution, at that refresh rate. And then when we run Future Pinball in this same resolution, it's now going to be synced up correctly together with this refresh rate, and then you're going to run Future Pinball in VR using that same refresh rate in whatever method you use, whether it be virtual desktop, Steam Link, or Air Link, or normal link. You just have to make sure it's also using that same refresh rate as well. So as long as everything's set the same, then and only then can you go and enable VSync. Okay, so I just want you guys to understand that it's very important. And so then you would choose it, and then you would hit apply, and then you're good to go. Okay, for the custom resolution portion. I'm not going to do that right now because I'm going to continue on in the video, and then we'll go cover more of that later. Okay, and it's just showing you the same process of what I just mentioned. And just to make sure, to reiterate, do not use Windows 8 compatibility. In the past, that was recommended as a way to avoid crashes and some issues because some Windows updates were causing problems with BAM for some reason. But that has since been resolved. So make sure your Windows is up to date and don't set FP Loader to Windows 8 anymore because it will absolutely degrade your Future Pinball performance and your VR performance big time. All right, I just want to make sure you guys understand that. So your VR connection options. So we have a few options here. We have virtual desktop wireless, which is the best option for Future Pinball. It works the best. You have to. It's a paid app, but it's so worth it. If you have a Pico or a MetaQuest 2 or 3, it's highly recommended. Very, very highly recommended. Fantastic app. Gives the best performance for Future Pinball VR, for PC VR, for Visual Pinball VR. Highly recommended. My number one option if you have a setup in your house for that to work. Okay. Uh, you also now have an option of Steam Link. It's brand new. It just came out. It works similar to Virtual Desktop, only it uses Steam VR directly, and it's an app on the MetaQuest that you can use to connect in a similar way. It's kind of buggy, and it doesn't look as good, and it has nowhere near as good a performance, but it is free, so it is an option, and it works similar to AirLink, which is the MetaQuest, the Oculus wireless solution, but it's still a little iffy currently. But it's an option. You can absolutely try that. And then, of course, you have the Oculus app, which is your option to either use a link cable. So that means hooked up using a link cable directly if you have a MetaQuest, or with AirLink, which is the wireless option. But I still recommend Virtual Desktop. But it is what it is. And that's what this is describing here. Now, I've included this app here, the XR Runtime Picker for OpenXR. So this app is located here in Tools and Other Apps here. So you may want to have this depending on what you've installed in your system. A lot of people are now, the newest version of Virtual Desktop Streamer, which is this guy right here, is now supporting what's called VDXR. It's a much faster way of using Virtual Desktop with OpenXR. Future Pinball doesn't support that, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. But you can still choose what your default is for OpenXR, and that's what this program is in here. And if you run it, it'll come up. So if for whatever reason you're having problems, you can change it to make Oculus OpenXR as the default. But most people are using this now. And Future Pinball should run fine when you're set up like this. But I've included it just in case, for whatever reason, in your setup you're having compatibility issues, and you could switch it back manually at any time if you want. And that's what that's for. Now, the Oculus desktop app, so that's this guy here. So this is used for if you run with a link cable, or if you run with an AirLink, then you have to have this installed, and that's what this is basically doing. So that way, you can go in here, you can make your changes if you want, you can change, what type of connection you're going to use and all that good stuff. But the bottom line is, this is needed only if you're going to use Link or AirLink. Now with Steam Link, you don't necessarily need this anymore, but it is an option that may work good for some people. All right, my last recommended option. Okay. Now, Steam VR settings. Now, unfortunately, we can't show those until you're actually in Steam VR and you have everything up and going. So even if you're here, you won't see the settings show up because we're not actually connected in VR currently. We're not running a VR session right now. So you're not going to see these show up yet. But when you are connected to VR, you can come back and make some of these changes, okay? Oh, excuse me, sorry. Wow. Oh, one more. Oh, excuse me, sorry there, guys. But I do want to point out that once you're up and running, you're going to have these extra options that you can enable. I recommend keeping render resolution on auto if you're using Virtual Desktop or Steam Link, or sorry, or AirLink or normal link. If you're using Steam Link, then you can go in and change these manually. But otherwise, leave it on auto because the other programs will manage the resolution themselves. So because if you don't leave it on auto, then you're going to have a duplicate render resolution, which will make it run really bad because now you're not just running at a higher resolution on the other program, but then you're also adding onto that here. So make sure you're set to sorry, I know that's hard to see. Your render resolution by default is set to auto when you're starting out on all this, okay? And leave it on auto for virtual desktop, for Steam, for AirLink and normal link, okay? Now, I've had it where if I had a crash, sometimes VR wouldn't work, and I didn't understand why, and I had to come into here and go in here because it had these turned off by default for some reason for virtual desktop. It just was not working for some reason, so I had to go in here and then unblock it. So if you're having a problem, just double check in here. You never know. Something could have happened. Okay. Okay, so let's start with the best option, and the option that I highly recommend, and it's the one that I and most other people like to use, and it's definitely the one that works best with Future Pinball, and that's Virtual Desktop. So this is a paid app you buy on your Pico or MetaQuest. It's not the Steam VR version or the old Rift version. Those are not the same thing. It has to be the standalone app on your Pico or your MetaQuest, okay? And you download that, or you'll install that on your VR headset, and then you'll install a separate streamer app, which is this guy right here, and this will run in the background, and you'll use similar settings to what I'm showing here, okay? And what this does is it'll basically stream everything you see on this desktop into VR. So that way you can literally use your computer in VR like normal. But then when you run Future Pinball in VR, then boom, it'll be just like any other Steam VR game, and it'll work in VR, and then it'll just automatically kick in. So this is what I use. I leave mine on my preferred codec on automatic, but you might prefer H.264. There's other options. Understand these newer, higher end options will increase more delay or on your stream. So try each to see which works best for you. But I recommend using these type of options for the settings here. So this will always just run in the background. So the idea is that when you run the app on your VR headset, it will then look for everything on your network that's running this app, and then you can connect to whichever PC on your network you want, and then from that point on, boom, you have your streaming session, and then you can run VR apps and everything else. So just one thing to point out, we used to use Open Composite DLL or Open Composite with Future Pinball in the past, but it no longer works correctly. Even the newest versions, it causes Future Pinball to crash, whether it's with Virtual Desktop or with Link now. It just doesn't work at all. So bottom line is, don't use Open Composite with Future Pinball anymore. All right. So the settings for Virtual Desktop. Now, this is what's in the app in your VR headset. I can't show you this. I can't easily show you this in a recording, so I'll just show you in the guide. So you'll run the app once you're connected to your PC. Then these are the settings you're going to want to use. So the one you want to make sure use optimal resolution is disabled. Absolutely make sure that will mess up so many things. So make sure that's disabled. The frame rate here, that is only for your desktop frame rate. That is not your VR frame rate. So that's just what it mirrors on your desktop into VR. But it's not the same thing as running a VR game in VR. So make sure you understand the difference there. So this can be whatever you want. I recommend trying to have it match what you're using in Windows if you have the option. Now, if you can only run at 60 hertz, well, then it's not going to matter anyway. But if you're using a custom resolution, let's say you're running it at 80 hertz, well, then you're going to want to set this to 80 hertz to match too, right? So, and you can change these on the fly, so it's not a problem. What else do we have here? Yeah, that's about it. It may change, have more or less settings with newer versions here, but that's the main thing to worry about there. And then the streaming tab, and it's kind of confusing with the naming here, but the streaming tab is actually your VR settings. So bottom line is, you're going to have this here. This is going to be your main settings. So this is going to choose what kind of resolution is being used. On my PC, I'm actually able to run godlike now. On my older PC, I would run it lower. It did help a little bit, but not too much. But the higher you run, the better, the more crisper the resolution is. It's a higher super sampling resolution. So Godleg looks fantastic on my PC. Even though it says an RTX 4090, I don't have that. I have an RTX 3080, and I was able to use this no problem. So this will vary per person. The other thing you want to make sure is this one right here, synchronous space warp. This is the one that is your Oculus synchronous space warp. So the idea is if you're running a VR app and your PC is too slow to stay above the minimum frame rate, so in this case, say staying above 72 frames per second, if that's what you're using here, or 80, or 120, or 90, then what it would do is it would then cut it in half. So in the case of 80, it would run it at 40 frames per second, and then it would interpolate the frames on your headset. Problem is, that doesn't work with Future Pinball or Visual Pinball very well at all. You want that disabled at all times. If you can't run the game fast enough, then you just don't have a fast enough PC, and that's all there is to it, guys. Always keep this disabled. Very important with Future Pinball, okay? The bitrate, now you may want to play with this. I've had it where 100 can run well. The higher you run this, the more latency you'll introduce. So try, I know I say 150, and I mean that depends on the codec you're using, but maybe try 100 and then work your way up and see what works best for you. Sharpening, always keep that at 100. And the performance overlay, so if you enable that, that will then show you what you're running at while you're in VR. So that way it'll tell you, okay, you're not running very good. So yeah, but you don't enable this unless you want it. Okay, so I just want to point out because I noticed that's checked off there. So yeah, that's basically what this is all about. This is your VR settings. So for example, if you were running one of these custom resolutions with the refresh rate at say 72 or 80 or 90, then make sure this is matching that. So that way this and that and Future Pinball, when running at the same resolution, in this case 1920 by 1080, at this resolution, and if I had VSync enabled, all three would be in sync and Future Pinball would run fantastic. If you cannot, as I mentioned before, run a custom resolution to match what you're running here in VR, if you can't have it all, these two match, then you have to have vertical sync off. Okay, very important. I'm gonna keep saying this over and over again, but it's very important. If you're not sure, just keep VSync off in Future Pinball. That's the bottom line. Okay. All right. So I can't really show you this, but the bottom line is once you start Future Pinball in VR and it's in VR, you can bring up this menu again at any time, and then it allows you to switch to desktop or to VR or to exit Steam VR if you need to for some reason. A lot of people don't realize these are here, so you can get to this by holding the menu button down on your left controller. If you just hold it down, this menu will come up, or if you double click it, it'll switch back and forth, and so you can come in and change some settings while you're playing. Like if you want to show the overlay that shows how good your performance is, you can toggle that on and off. So a lot of people don't realize that. So yeah, very, very, very handy. And okay, so that's the bottom line. That's the main stuff for virtual desktop that you need to know. Fantastic program. Just take the time to try all the different settings. Really, 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 really recommended. Okay, so now the next app that you can use is Steam Link. This is brand new. This literally just came out. It's an app that you can get for free on your MetaQuest right now. It works similar to Steam to Virtual Desktop, but the difference is it doesn't use the streamer app. It has to use Steam VR, to connect. So the only difference is it's not using this extra streamer app. But it works very similar, but right now it's kind of a mess, quite frankly. The performance isn't as good. The visual quality isn't as good. I do find it does work better for Future Pinball, however, than Link or AirLink. It definitely gives you much better performance for Future Pinball compared to those, but it's not as good as Virtual Desktop. But it's free, so you can try it. Just understand it's brand new as of when I made this video, so it could be a little kooky. But you can change the resolution and all the other VR settings directly in VR, which, you know, similar to what, you know, you can do on virtual desktop here, you can do that with Steam Link as well. So I can't really show you much on that because it's brand new, and, you know, so, but yeah, that's your other option. And then you also have the MetaQuest Link and AirLink options. So again, I'm not connected. That's why I can't show you. That's why I'm showing you here. So the bottom line is you would either connect your Link cable, and then you would go to your device settings, and then that's where you can change your resolution to work with it. Now again, like I mentioned before, if you could run a custom resolution on your monitor to match what you're using in here, then you can have VSync enabled. If you cannot do that, then you have to have VSync disabled, so that way your Future Pinball can run at a higher refresh rate or higher FPS to match whatever is running in here, okay? It's recommended to have VSync on if you can use the custom resolution, though. That's the best performing, but not everyone can do that. But yeah, so the bottom line is, this is where you go. I'd recommend at a lower resolution at first, and then if you have a faster PC, then you can increase this, and, you know, but again, that's up to you. Start low, work your way up, and see if you can run faster. All right? All right, so now when you're actually running, no matter what option you use for Future Pinball, you're going to be using Steam VR. So if you use Virtual Desktop, once Future Pinball loads, Steam VR will then appear, and then Future Pinball and VR will then appear. Okay, if you're using Link or AirLink, same thing. You'll go to the Oculus Link VR environment, but then when you run a Future Pinball, then it kicks into Steam VR, which then kicks into Future Pinball VR. If you're using Steam Link, same idea. It'll then just directly go into Steam VR and then go into Future Pinball VR. Okay? All right. Okay, so how do we run Future Pinball and BAM in VR? Well, I already mentioned about, the settings you need to use, right? So you have to run Future Pinball. Well, not this guy here. You have to run Future Pinball from BAM OpenVR, right? So this is what you start with, this here in this folder. You do not start it from any other location, and then you make sure you have the right settings as I showed before, and reflections are off. VSync is either on or off depending on what you have everything set to, like I talked about earlier in the video. All right. Now in my case, I've added this extra batch file here. Start Future Pinball VR. That will automatically change the settings for you, and then make sure it's going to have what you need for VR. Just understand, I have VSync off by default. At least I think it did. Yeah. So if you go through here and you read, this is the vertical sync line setting. Okay. So what this is doing is changing your vertical sync. So if you want VSync on, you change that to 1, you save the file, and then from that point on, every time you run this batch file, it'll then make sure VSync is turned on. Okay? So just keep that in mind in case, you're like, well, wait a minute, why is it running like crap? I want it to be in vertical sync because I'm using a custom resolution. That's why. Okay? So normally, you would run Future Pinball. It would then start up Steam VR automatically. Once the table's completely loaded, then you may have to click into your Future Pinball window to bring it back into focus, and then eventually you'll see the Future Pinball VR screen fade in. Okay, I can't really show you that here, but that's what I'm trying to describe here. Okay. You can recenter your view using the home key, and we'll get into all that. All right. Now, keep in mind, when you exit a table, just like any other thing with Future Pinball, you always close Future Pinball completely every time, and then go back and reload another table. Now, sometimes you might want to also close Steam VR as well each time, because if you leave it running in the background, sometimes it just gets weird or goofy. So a good habit is exit Future Pinball, close Steam VR, and then reload Future Pinball again. That's the best habit to get into. Now, if you use some kind of front end like Pin a Popper, you can have it do that for you automatically. You can, run commands to make it force that. But otherwise, make sure, Now, Virtual Desktop, for example, makes it easy because it has exit Steam VR built right in. So that way you don't have to, take your headset off and do things, all that. You can do it all right from VR if you want. Like you can run Future Pinball, play a game, exit Future Pinball, and then exit Steam VR, and then rerun Future Pinball all within VR. You don't have to take your headset off over and over again. All right? All right. So there you go. Yeah. And when you run VR, you may have to recenter your view depending on what you're using. It depends, right? You may have to recenter your view in your headset, and then you may have to recenter your view with BAM as well. Okay, so just keep that in mind. But we'll go through that. And the focus issues, this is what I was talking about. So sometimes when Future Pinball starts up in VR, Steam VR may take it out of focus, even though your head tracking is moving and everything seems to be right, but then it's not switching to VR in Future Pinball, it's just staying in Steam VR. Well, then you just have to take your mouse and kind of click into the Future Pinball window. Even though you don't see it, it will then make it back into focus. And the same idea, and then eventually the table should appear, okay? The other thing is the BAM menu may be frozen until you're in focus, and your keys may not respond. Even though the head movement seems working, you can see the table. So the bottom line is you have to make sure that you're in focus with Future Pinball when you start in VR and a table has been started and all that. You'll understand once you start running it a couple of times. And then performance overlays. So I talked about that before. Each system, whether it's a virtual desktop or Steam Link or Link or Air Link, they each have their own way of showing a performance overlay to show how many frames per second you're running at. So if you're at a 72 hertz setting in VR, so if this is what you were set to run at, but your FPS is not above that, then Future Pinball won't run correctly, and then the ball movement will be terrible. So you have to always be above whatever you are set to in your VR settings, and those can help narrow down. It'll tell you right there that what's going on, right? And that's basically what this is all talking about. All of this here is talking about the same thing. Fast PC, FPS has to be high enough, and then you'll be good. If the FPS dips below, well, then your VR will start to stutter. Your ball will stutter. So that's what all this is talking about. All right. Okay, so the BAM VR settings. Now, I'm not going to go through this in the guide because I'm going to show you in VR about all this. But there's a few settings in here that are very important. You have to make sure that Vsync is off, and then your frame latency. Now, you may need to change this because this is different for each person. So if it seems to have a delayed movement or it's making you feel well, then go in and try changing the frame latency. Because, for example, when I'm using virtual desktop, for me, I have to have this set to 1. If I'm using Steam Link, I have to have this set to -1. Otherwise, I feel all yucky in VR when playing, right? So this is going to be probably the most important one that everyone has to set, all right? And Vsync has to be off. If you use my VR settings, then all of this should be set up automatically for you except for the frame latency. So if you're not sure, easy solution, just go into my setup and guides, my Future Pinball install guide, Future Pinball settings, or no, the BAM settings, and then BAM settings for VR, and then you just do a copy, and then you go back into your BAM OpenVR folder, and then you just paste the settings in there, and then you're using the recommended settings, which should be something along the lines of this with Vsync off and other settings already set up for you. All right? Okay. So I just wanted to touch on those before I actually try going into VR because those are very important. All these other ones are optional extras. You can read up more about them. The add-ons, this is very important. The 3D stereo sync being on may help for some people. These other ones you can have just like you see here. I recommend having the bulb size set to 2 so the DMD looks easier, like it's much more visible in VR. It looks a lot better in my opinion. But these other ones are probably going to be the same. Okay, they have to be similar to this. Table lighting, that's going to be dependent on the table. You can read more about that, but you can change it in VR. Just like normal Future Pinball, you can change all the settings in here. If it's a PinEvent table, this will be preset for you automatically, and it'll override your settings every time the table loads. Same thing with post-processing, same idea. You can change the BAM menu actually, which is very handy. If you don't like it being in the center like this, you can have it off to the right or the left, and I'll show you all that in VR. And then just like normal Future Pinball, you have your table config files that you deal with, and if you want to save your BAM menu and default VR settings, so let's say you want to have your table position be a certain way, or you want to have it on a certain angle. Like when I'm sitting in a chair, like I am right now, I'll change the angle so that I can look straight ahead and play the game comfortably, just like I would with a TV, instead of having to do it like the default where you have to look down all the time, like a normal pinball cabinet. So you can change all that any way you want. BAM is very, very flexible. Way more flexible than Pinball Effects in VR or VP in VR in terms of any way you want to have things set up. Once you have things set up the way you like, then save as default, and then you're good to go. And what that will do is that will save the settings that we just copied. It'll save them to these files here, and then every table that loads from that point on will use the same settings. Okay. RayCast ball shadows, I've talked about that before. Those are very demanding. You can disable them in the BAM menu. And if it's a PinEvent table, you have to disable it in table options in the table script first, and then disable it in the BAM menu. So tables. All right, so again, tables, not specific for VR. It's just telling you what you can download. 120 hertz. Don't even bother. Just don't bother. No one has a PC fast enough. That's all there is to it. And then ways of improving visuals. You can, go into your 3D settings in here for Future Pinball and try to do some things. I recommend not doing that. I don't think I have Future Pinball actually on here. So you'd have to add Future Pinball into here and then go into settings. I recommend not changing anything until you have everything dialed in perfectly. But even then, you shouldn't be touching anything in there really at all. And that's basically the end here for the guide. And then you have a small FAQ in here just for VR specific stuff. So for example, when you're running it and VR isn't working, you can go into the BAM menu and make sure that you're set to OpenVR, not HappyCab. You think it's running in VR, but you can't see the table. Well, try looking around or push the reset view, which is F12 by default. Make sure your VR headset view is reset as well. And I mentioned this before about the delay, which is your latency. And then the table plays smooth, and then there's various options you can do to try to sort that out. Okay, so now that all that is done, okay, let's we're gonna go back and I'm gonna basically try to show you as best I can how this works in VR. Okay guys, so I'm going to go through the process here of how I normally go through connecting in VR. I'm using virtual desktop, and this is the only one I'm really going to show you here because it's, the other ones, it's up to you to follow through and do that, but this is what I use as virtual desktop, okay? So basically, I make sure my VR streamer is running, and I have my settings correct, and then now I just put on my headset. All right, so now you're not seeing this, but I have my headset on right now. So I'm going to run virtual desktop in my headset. So now it's starting up, and it's found my PC, and it has connected, and boom. So now I can currently see my desktop in VR. So, I'm looking at my desktop in my VR headset right now. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a Future Pinball in VR. So I'm going to use my batch file. It's going to make sure everything's set up according to what I mentioned in the guide. So it's going to make sure that your reflections are turned off and VSync is turned off. In this case, I'm not going to use a custom resolution just for this first demonstration in the video. And I'm going to run Future Pinball in HD, which I have matching to what I'm using on Windows. Okay. because you don't want Future Pinball running in 4K because it's not a benefit. Like, you're just using more resources for no benefit. So yeah, as long as you're basically good here. Anti-aliasing, there's no point. It won't help. Trilinear, I prefer leaving that on. Okay, so all these other settings need to be the same. Make sure the back box and arcade are not enabled. That is required for VR. Okay, so I'm just going to bring up a table. So I'll bring up Sonic Pinball Mania. And then I'm going to basically talk through what happens when we connect in VR, okay? So when I start, I can still see this loading screen in virtual desktop in VR. And it's just loading the table up. And then once the table starts, is completely loaded, then you should see Steam VR kick in your headset, all right? Now, this is Future Pinball running in full screen, which I highly recommend. If you don't do this, then the BAM menu will take things out of focus. Okay, so Steam VR just popped up now, and then boom, within seconds, Sonic Pinball Mania has appeared. Alright, so you can see my head's moving around. Now, I can't make this smooth for you guys, unfortunately. There's no way for me to do that. But I'm just going to try to be very gentle so I don't make you sick. So you can see now I can look around in the VR room. Now this looks absolutely amazing, guys. I wish, I could, relay just how cool it is. But yeah, when you see this in VR, it's amazing. So this is the default settings right now, okay? So what I'm doing right now is I'm pushing F12 to recenter my view. And if I look down, I can see the table. So you can see it's kind of not in a good location, but we'll take care of that. So now, the one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the mouse on my computer and I'm just going to kind of do a click into the Future Pinball window. I don't see it, but I know that the mouse in the background is behind the Future Pinball window. So then if I click in that same area, it's going to make sure Future Pinball is in focus. So that way when I, when I push my keys like I just did, I know it's going to work, and it's working now. So in the case of this table, I need to kind of just get it started up. Alright. So I just have the table kind of running just so I don't have to deal with it. So here, I'm going to turn the volume down. Alright. So what you can do now, because my view is not really correct, is I can bring up the BAM menu. Okay. Now, luckily for me, this is running smooth because I copied those BAM setting files over. Everything's set up correctly. So I pushed the tilde key or a Q key. Now, for me, I have the BAM menu off to the right. Now, that you can change that, but that's where I currently have it. So if I look over here, you can see the settings I was talking about. So I currently have anti-aliasing off. I recommend starting with that at first. Unless you have a fast computer, you can increase it. And that's for VR, and it does make things look nicer, but it is more demanding. So just keep that in mind. Vsync has to be off, no matter what. In BAM VR, you have to always have that off. Whether you're using Vsync in Future Pinball settings, no matter what, this has to be off, okay? By default, it's on, which doesn't make things run well. So that's why I'm showing you this in case you're not sure. Switch that to off, exit the menu, exit BAM, exit Future Pinball, and then reload and then try again. Because sometimes the settings don't kick in until you've restarted Future Pinball. And that goes for a lot of the settings on here, for that matter. The controllers, I mean, you can have them visible if you want. Like, I don't know if they'll show up here or not, because I don't have them handy, but I prefer to just keep them off. Now, the home key, that's to reset your view. Now, if you want to change your BAM menu settings, you can just go to here, and go here, and then, let's see here, and then have it appear right in front of you if you want. Some people may like that, some people may not. So I'll just keep it here for the moment. Or actually, no, that's kind of hard to, hold on a second, let's see. Yeah, it's a little hard to see, so I'm going to change that back. Because I don't know how well this is looking, in the video, because I'm in VR, right? So, alright. So, but you have that option. You can change it if you want. Okay? So let's just go back to where we were. Alright, so this is the standard stuff. Now, if you need to adjust your position, because I need to right now, then you could do that from your start cam position. So you could do your Z, your Y, and in my case, I just brought the Y up, and that's actually pretty good. That's actually not bad. All right. So that's all right. I just want to change my lighting for a second here. Okay. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Yeah, that's more correct. Okay. So as you can see here, I mentioned before, you can change the main camera starting position, but then if you want to go into table and lighting, then you can go even further and you can change the angle if you want. You can do it however you want to do it. All right. Now that's how I prefer to do it, but everyone's different. Okay. You can change the. Well, I don't know if that's gonna. Yeah, that none of these will have an effect because it's, it's VR. You can't change the scale, right? But you can change the table translation separately from the camera view if you want. So this is a per table setting, right? All right. So the lights again, post-processing, you can change that if you want. And that's per table, just like normal BAM in regular mode, right? So this is what I was talking about before, the frame latency. So I noticed that it was delaying a little bit for me. So what I do is I set that for me in virtual desktop to 1, and then now everything's much better. If I go way back, it's like, whoa, it feels like I'm, kind of nauseous a little bit. So make sure you change the frame latency right away to see what works best for you, okay? All right, so that's the main stuff that's in here. You can change to be seated or standing. It doesn't really matter. I'm not sure what the benefit of each is. Scale, yeah, you can actually change the scale. Oh, wow. Oh, okay. I recommend not doing that. Oh, that was weird. Okay, yeah, don't do that. So if we go back to your main BAM menu, when you're happy with all your settings, and you have them the way you want for a default startup for every table, just go back to the main menu and choose Save as Default. So now, this is how every table will start up when they're loaded for the first time. If a table is still out of whack, well then all you got to do is come back here and choose Reset to Default, and then boom, it'll use whatever you saved as your default for that table. So if you screw settings up on a table and you're like, oh, this one table's all messed up, well then you can go to Reset to Default and you're good to go. Okay? Okay, so the other options you want to check out are going to be in add-ons. So, keep these off. They're going to be off anyways for VR, so it doesn't matter. DMD bulb size again. The DMD looks much better because if you have it at 1, it's kind of crummy, So I recommend having it at 2. Hide Future Pinball logo. You always want that on because you don't want that in the bottom right corner when you're in VR. Hide overlays, always, you definitely want that on because, again, you don't want that in the upper corner. It's not meant for VR and it's just going to look horrible. Frame limiter, you can mess around with this. I always have it off. It just seems to work more correctly for me that way. Screen shaking in VR, I'm not actually sure what that actually does. I've always had it just on. And then the 3D sync mod, now some people say this works great for them, some people say it doesn't. Or some people say it has no effect at all whatsoever. So you can try it, like it may work better, it may not. Okay? So that's the main stuff in there. And you have to make sure this is always on yes. If VR is not working, check that setting, force arcade mode. If it's not enabled, VR will not work. Okay, so that's very important. And I think that's it for there. What else? Oh, this one here, yeah. So if for some reason VR is not working, check to see the mode setting. I can't show you right now, but basically the mode setting is your static cam, happy cam, and all those. Cycle all those until you get to OpenVR, and then boom, it should then kick back into VR. Sometimes that happens. If it does, reinstall your BAM settings files again and see if that helps. Okay? But beyond that, I think that's it for all the settings we need to have. And then now I'm in VR. Yeah, how about that, man? So I don't know if I'm going to be able to... No, I can't. So my controller's not set up right now. Okay. So I'll just disable that. All right, so let's turn it up a little so we can actually hear it. Now, again, this is probably not going to come across very well in the video, but for me, this looks absolutely stunning. Like, absolutely amazing.
I'm tired of your monotonous games.
Absolutely amazing. It's running smooth. The ball movement is nice and smooth. There's no focus issues or no blurriness. You know, and everything's playing really amazing. If you've never played in VR for pinball when it's nice and smooth with no jaggies or anything else, you're missing out. Like, this is a completely different experience. Like, this looks like a real pinball table in front of me. Like, you know, like I can like get in. Oop, I accidentally hit something here. Hold on. Give me a second here. There we go. All right. Oh, I'm stepping out of my boundaries. Okay, so it doesn't like me doing that because I'm set up for a stationary boundary right now, so I can't get too close right now. But you can move around and look at everything. It looks amazing, super detailed. The lighting is fantastic. Yeah, all I can say is unless you've played this in VR, you don't know what you're missing, man. Like, it looks like a real table in front of you. And Future Pinball's lighting and the shadows and everything else, you know, it just looks better than even FX and Visual Pinball. Like, you know, when you have newer tables like Sonic or my other table updates, when you see it in VR, nicely set up, running smooth with proper lighting, everything's in sync. It looks so nice. It really does. It looks very different than all other pinball programs in VR. That's the best way I can describe it. It's by far my favorite, and I've been praising Future Pinball in VR for years. You know, it's just now we're finally at a point where the PCs are fast enough that we can run them at a high resolution, and it looks crisp and clean, and all the lighting and everything just looks amazing. So yeah, that's all I can really say about that. You know, it's absolutely amazing when everything's running good. You know, everything's smooth. I'm not having any problems. You know, you may have to play with things for your own personal preferences, but yeah, man. And then if you combine this with, like, you know, a PinEvent pup-pack, which would show on your back box if you have it enabled, but that's another video. Okay. If you have surround sound feedback enabled, you know, that would show, or that would translate really nicely, you know. So yeah, VR, if you have a fast enough PC and a headset and a setup to make it work, it is absolutely worth it in Future Pinball. It is more finicky, but it does absolutely work perfect and proper if you have the setup. So yeah, so I'll come out of that. So now I just exited my table. So now you guys are seeing the desktop, but for me, I don't see that right now. I actually see Steam VR. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up my virtual desktop menu, and so now I can see virtual desktop, and I'm just going to click Steam VR from virtual, or exit Steam VR from virtual desktop, and then now Steam VR just closes out, and now I can see my Windows desktop again. All right, so that's the bottom line of getting it up and running. Now, the only other thing I would say that's different is if you want to, for example, use a custom resolution. So in that case, like I said, you would just go in here. You would set your custom resolution. Now I'm going to try it at 80 hertz. This may make things not look so smooth in the video, so I'm just giving you a heads up. I'm going to hit yes. So now Windows is running at 80 hertz, 1920 by 1080. Okay, so now with Future Pinball, I'm going to run it in VR, but understand this guy was originally set to have VSync off, right? Okay, so remember that? See, it's got vertical sync off. So if I want VSync on from this guy every single time, then all I got to do is look for vertical sync, and then I just go here and I change this to 1. And then I save. Alright, so now every time I run this, it's going to have VSync enabled. Now you can make a copy of that batch file. You can have one that's labeled as VSync on, VSync off. You know, you can do it however you want, and then now you can see, boom, right? We're running at the same resolution, 1920 by 1080, and there we go. And then in VR, I'm set to 80 for the virtual desktop settings. Let me just double check that, make sure. And then it's the same process. Yep. So now it's going to run, but it's going to run even better now. Everything's going to be in sync. Like the table, Future Pinball, VR, Windows, everything's running at the same frequency, the same refresh rate, same FPS, and Future Pinball always runs better with VSync enabled. So if you can get this to work, that's awesome. So all right, so just load it up, and there we go. And I'm just going to change my lighting again. So understand the table lighting is going to override certain settings in VR. There we go. And I can, hold on. There we go, I can hear it. Everything's running really nice. Oh yeah. Like, it's even better now. Like, even though it was running, like, pretty much almost perfect before, it's just, it's more rock solid. It's the best way I can describe it with VSync running. So if you can make that work, if you're lucky enough, that's the way to go, okay? It's just running fantastic. There we go. All right, I'm not gonna sit here all day and just play. So I just exited the table. Now I'm just gonna close down Steam VR from Virtual Desktop, and there we go. All right. So I want to show one more thing. You can run Future Pinball in windowed mode. All right, so if you want to run Future Pinball in windowed mode, you can do that. If for whatever reason you feel need to do that, but I want to show you what happens when you do. So I've just disabled full screen. Now it's going to run Future Pinball in windowed mode. Now you can run it in a smaller window, and I'll do that just so you guys can see. Like, we'll do that. All right, and you can leave vertical sync on, but that may or may not run well. It's up to you to try. So this time when I run it, so now Future Pinball's in a window. So when it runs, now you can actually see other stuff on your desktop at the same time, and it'll run. But understand there's an issue when it comes to focus or the BAM menu, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about here. Very important because this can confuse a lot of people. All right, so now, even though you're seeing the full desktop with the window and everything, and you can see me moving around in VR, I only see VR because it switched to VR now, right? So, so if I want to hit the BAM menu, so if I hit Q, all right, now it's coming up just fine. I don't know if it's going to be, oh, actually it is. Okay, I'm surprised. It's actually working just fine. So sometimes when you do that when you're in windowed mode, what will happen is it will take BAM Future Pinball out of focus. Sorry, I'm trying to look at the actual screen. And then what you'll have to do is you'll have to take the mouse and then you'll have to click into the window and then bring it back into focus. Even though your head movement is working, your controls might not work. So just keep that in mind. If everything seems frozen or your controls are not responding, make sure you take your mouse and click into here. Okay. Oh, see, that's what just happened right now. So it's frozen. So I can't move. It switched back to Steam VR, like the instead of Future Pinball. So what I have to do is I click into there, and then boom, now it all came back again. So that's very important that you guys know that, because that can totally mess you up if you don't understand what's going on. Okay. So yeah, and I mean it is working. It is working okay. But you may have possible sync issues depending on how your system's set up. But it depends, right? Because if you're running at a different refresh rate, all that good stuff. So just play around with it. See which works best for you. Like right now, this is actually running just fine for me. But again, it depends on your system. Okay? So I just wanted to show that in windowed mode. So that way you can see. So now, even though you guys can't see it, I'm still, even though I closed the table, now I'm back into Steam VR. So then I'm just going to, use Virtual Desktop, and it'll just close down Steam VR. And there you go. All right. So I think that's the main bits. I guess I could show one more thing. I could show what it looks like to have a pup-pack running. So let's just try that. So if you want to, this is all part of the PinEvent settings. So if you want to have PinEvent tables run with the pup-pack, you have to have PuP stream enabled. So to do that, yeah, first of all, you have to have PinUp Player installed. You have to be set up correctly for that. You have to have your PinUp displays set up correctly, and that's a separate video, but I'm just going to show you that it works. So you go into your PinEvent settings in the scripts folder, and then you want to make sure that you have PuP-DMD enabled. And you can do PuP-SSF as well if you want. Alright, so you have to make sure that's enabled for VR, okay? And then you would have to come down here and have PuP-Stream enabled. Only do these after you have everything running, and if it runs terrible, disable it, okay? Because this is going to do this for all PinEvent tables, alright? So now, I'll just close up Sonic. Oh, shoot, I didn't want that. So I'll close up Sonic. But let's get back to where we were there. Okay, so Pinball, Future Pinball, and we're back here again. All right, so now what should happen is you should be able to see, well, you won't see it on this screen. Well, here, you know what? Maybe I'll try that. Okay, you know what? Maybe I will try that. Give me a second here. So I'm just going to set up my PUP displays. Hold on a second. No. Let's just try this. Okay, now you guys can't see this because it's off screen, so I'm just going to... So here's my PuP-DMD setup. Okay, so I'm just going to put this in the corner here. Or actually, maybe this corner here. Alright, and I'm going to make it... there. That's a 16:9 ratio, which is what we need. This is all we use for Future Pinball. Okay, so this is our PinUp Player settings, and then I just hit save. So if you only have one screen, you can, with VR, absolutely do it all in one screen. It's actually kind of easier in some ways. So now that I'm running Future Pinball, I can run it in a smaller window, but I'll keep it where it was at. And I'm just going to run Sonic Pinball Mania. This should work. Oh no, hold on. It was on full screen. Oh shoot, I got to change that back. Oh, see? Even I got to pay attention. So just give me a moment here, guys. This is going to be all messed up here. So because I'm running this in full screen, this won't work because Future Pinball is going to be covering the PUP display. So I have to exit this and change that up. Normally I have my pup-pack displayed on a second screen, and then that will work to stream it into Future Pinball in VR. But because I don't have that in this case... Alright, hold on. There we go. Alright, let's change this again. Sorry, guys. Let's get this working correctly again. There. Close window. Alright. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah. Make sure it's on. In this case, I didn't want it to be like that. Alright, so... Now, you can try to move your window off to the side if you want, but it should work. Oh, I made it. Yeah, when it comes to Future Pinball, you don't want to mess with the window at all until it's done loading. Actually, I might have screwed that up. Hold on. Yeah, I think I did. Oh, no. Okay, it's good. Alright, so now let me just take a look here. Okay, let's see if it's working. Yep, there it goes. Okay, so now I can't see the desktop, but, well, actually, yeah, I actually can. Hold on a second. Give me a second here. So in Virtual Desktop, I just double-clicked at the left controller's settings button. So now I can see my desktop the same way you guys are. So you can see the pup-pack is on the top left, and it's working just fine. And now, because I enabled PuP-Stream, what it's doing is it's capturing everything in this area, and then it's going to stream it on the back box down here, and it's just going to work like normal, you know? So even though I only have one screen, you know, I can make this work. Now look, now as an example, I can't get my controls to work in Future Pinball. Head tracking's moving, but I can't get that to work, right? So what I do is I click into the Future Pinball window. Now it works. Okay. All right. There you go. See, she's working okay. Now, I don't know how smooth this is looking in the video. Probably not very smooth at all because it's not, you know, synced up. It's a different refresh rate. So there's nothing I can do about that, guys. I'm sorry, unfortunately. But yeah. So see? So I don't see this whole desktop. I just see, you know, virtual reality right now. You know, I just see the table as it normally is. So I just play like normal, and then I can look up if I want to see the display. I can look down if I want. That's optional. You don't have to have that. You can disable that in the PinEvent settings. Excuse me, in the PinEvent settings. But yeah, I just wanted to show you that. Yeah, you can absolutely have this working, and it's totally cool, man. There you go. All right, and that's all I really wanted to show with that. So there you go. All right, so now you guys can get a quick idea of how PuP-Stream works in Future Pinball. I know there's a little mess up in the middle there, you know, but it's all good now. So again, as I always say, when you exit a table, you should always close Future Pinball, and you should always close Steam VR just in case. That way, when you start it up again, it's going to be fresh and it's all going to be working. So as you saw, I had a couple of hiccups there, so it pays to pay attention. If you're using these batch files, understand they make changes to your Future Pinball settings. So when I started this one up, you know, again, it re-enabled full screen, right? So you have to make sure you're paying attention to that, or you're going to have confusion. If you're not sure, you don't have to use the batch files. You can just go into here, run FP Loader manually, and make your changes. And if you don't need to make changes at all, if you keep this set all the time because you only play in VR, then that's fine. You don't have to use the batch files. Or you can make a batch file with these settings. It's up to you. All right. So just wanted to point that out in case people are a little confused with that. Okay, guys. So I'm going to do one more display. Basically, what I've done now is I've set it up so that I have the pup-pack displayed on a separate screen. So let's say you have a cabinet set up, for example, or you know, you have a desktop setup with a secondary monitor, or you have a dummy plug. You know, if you're using you know, that kind of setup for a single screen setup, which I have a guide for as well in here. So I have two of them. The one I just showed you was the windowed guide, you know, but the other one is a PuP-Stream guide. Okay, so I'm not going to go through that in this video, but I'm basically doing the same thing right now. I'm going to run Future Pinball in full screen. And the pup-pack is going to be displayed on a separate screen, and then it's just going to work in VR. So double check, make sure I'm good to go for all my settings. I'm using a custom resolution. That's why vertical sync is enabled. Everything is matching in terms of refresh rate. So I'm going to try the ultimate VR experience for pinball. So this is the most demanding virtual pinball game out there. It's more demanding than any visual pinball table out there. It's more demanding than all my other PinEvent releases. You know, it's just very, very demanding. Is all I can say. It's the one table that I could not get to run well, even on my other PC until now. Now that I have a fast enough PC, I can finally run this in VR, and it's running smooth, and it looks and plays amazing. Like this table, you know, I am so happy that it's working in VR correctly, the way it was meant to be. Because I put a lot of work into the VR room for this table, and there's just so much cool stuff, but you need a really fast PC like the one I'm using right now to make it all run smooth. So it takes a while, but once it's loaded, it's amazing, guys. Yeah. I wish I could accurately describe how things look, you know, because when you see it in VR, it's a night and day difference. So right now I have oh, there it goes. It just popped up. She should be starting up in a second now, and then there you go. Our pup display is running. I'm just going to turn this down a little bit.
R2-D2, wake up, you little slacker!
All right. So that was a good example. I couldn't get anything to respond from my controls. I had to click into the Future Pinball window with my mouse. Even though it's full screen, I still had to make it do that to bring it into focus. So sometimes Steam VR will do that. So I'm just going to keep the sound down for a moment here. So you can see We have Darth Vader's Disco-Rama, man. Like, yeah, this looks absolutely stunning. And you can see the pup-pack is running just fine in the background there on our back box. And you can also see it down here on the apron. And yeah, it's being streamed in. And it's running really perfect, actually. But again, you have to have a very fast PC to make this work. A fast video card is not enough. The CPU, the single core speed of your CPU has to be really fast to work with a fast video card in Future Pinball. It absolutely makes a difference. All right, so let me just take a moment here. So see that back window? You know that? Oh, sorry. Yeah, I stepped out of my boundaries. I'm using stationary boundary, unfortunately, so I can't go too far. But yeah, that back window where you can see the opening and the ships flying around, that looks like so three-dimensional. Like, it looks like there's an actual cutout opening into space there. It is so cool. And if you look around, like, it looks like I have an actual space window, like I'm in some kind of space station or spacecraft or something. And you can see the ships flying by. Like, it's absolutely amazing, man. You know, you look both sides, and you can see space off in the distance. You know, like, I worked really hard on this VR room. You know, it was the first time I really tried doing anything like this, and it turned out so cool. But it wasn't until now that I have a fast enough computer that I was able to run it and enjoy it, and it just looks amazing, guys. You know, those characters are extremely detailed. You know what I mean? So that's why this table takes so much to run. And just things like, you know, like, look at the lightsabers. You know, like, sorry, I keep stepping out of my stupid boundaries. Hold on. Darn it. Look at the lightsabers. Now, again, normally if I had my boundaries not so restricted, because I'm sitting in a chair right now, then you could walk around and look at everything you want, right? But right now, everything looks just amazing. Like the lightsabers, the metal, you know, when you move around, the way the metal actually, you know, shows the reflections changing, it just looks stunning, guys. You know, the inserts, if you look at the inserts, you can see, because these are 3D mesh inserts that I put in there, you can actually see the depth. They're like sunken into the playfield. And you can see the bump maps, the reflections on all the bumps from the lighting and everything. It just looks amazing, guys. The turret in the back there, you know, like, you can see all the details. The Death Star, even from here, I can see a lot of detail in there. It's just amazing. You know, all the characters. Now, I can try turning around. I don't know if it's going to freak out on me or not. But... And, yeah, you can see Luke playing Star Wars back there. Yeah, he's having a good old time. Yeah. So there's a lot in this room. There we go. Sorry, guys. It keeps messing up on me. There we go. Yeah. All right. Now I'm back into my seat. So, yeah. So we'll just start this sucker up and play a little bit. Now, look at that. The spaceships come flying in from the back. Oh, man. This looks amazing, guys. And then you got your BB-8 ball. This looks so amazing, guys. Like, and it's actually really smooth. Again, though, you need a really fast computer. The lightsabers, the effects from that, the glow, the turret. Oh man, it's like it's blasting right at your face. It's so cool, man. Yeah, that is like so cool. And you can see Darth Vader coming in there. Now, I know this probably doesn't look super smooth in the video, but trust me, this looks amazing in VR. It's like I have this real table right in front of me. It's like Yoda is right in front of me. See 3PO. It's just amazing, guys. I'm just going to play a little bit. Try to see a lot of cool stuff. Yeah, oh yeah. When I had the pup-pack going, you know, it all looks absolutely amazing. Oh man, look at that. It's like he's literally flying around right in front of you. With physics, man, this plays really good. That is so cool, man. It's like right in front of me. It's like the ship is flying right in front of me and it's going to blow up in my face. Oh, he was disappointed. Oh, look at that. That is so cool, man.
Fulfill your destiny.
Ah, so awesome. Look at that. Look at that. That is so cool. All right. I think I'll cut it there, guys.
Lightsaber feels kind of like it's alive.
Well, this table feels like it's alive in VR there, Luke. So yeah, this is super cool, guys. All right, so I'll just cut her off there. So yeah, hold on a second. I'm just getting out of a virtual desktop there, and I'm exiting Steam VR. There we go. Okay, guys. So yeah, I think I'll just cut it there. I know there's a lot there, and showing stuff in VR isn't the best kind of video because you guys can't really see what I'm seeing, man. It is so amazing. So I just wanted to go through all this, you know, to show you that it can run if you have the right kind of setup. It's a little confusing at first. It takes a bit to go through it all. But the one thing I have to emphasize, fast PC. A lot of people think they have a good PC and it can play a lot of the AAA PC games, and so it should be good enough for Future Pinball. Well, it might not be. You know, Future Pinball's an older program, so it's very restricted by your CPU's single core speed. So if, you know, you have an 8-core PC, well, if that single core speed is not good enough, it'll hold back your video card with Future Pinball. So that's all I can try to basically describe on that. Use the examples that I have, you know, as a base reference for how fast you'll need, you know. And you can disable reflections by the standards. Everyone should be doing that. And you can turn off RayCast shadows in the BAM menu if you need to, as well as I mentioned before, all PinEvent tables have that option right here. In table options near the top of the script, look for RayCast shadows. There you go. So you just set that to false. Save the table, load the table, and when you get into the BAM menu, you can turn the RayCast shadows off in the config ball shadows menu. You have to do both. Okay. So if you disable RayCast, you disable reflections, close everything, restart it all. It should run much better as a result. Even with my faster PC, you know, I have to do that on some tables, you know, and then disable the PuP options as well at first. You know, don't do PuP stream right away. Wait until you get things up and running and smooth, and you might have to keep it disabled. It may not run well for you. So just manage your expectations, guys. So yeah, I hope this guide is helpful for you. You know, this is mainly focused on, you know, the MetaQuest. But most of what I've shown on here and talked about applies to like other headsets, like if you have an Index or a Vive or you know, maybe a G2. I haven't, you know, I haven't really talked to many people that have used that yet. But yeah, so that's all I gotta say, man. So I hope this was helpful. Look out for my next guide. I'm not sure what it'll be, but you know, we got more in here, so. We got more to come. And yeah, so thanks for watching, guys. I guess I'll see you in my next video.